Hello and welcome to Comunidad del Valle. I'm Damian Trujillo, and today we have a very special show. On my left is San Jose Mayor Chuck Reed. Welcome back to the show. And on my right is San Jose Police Officer Franco Votto. We're going to discuss the issues and hopefully make peace between the administration and the San Jose Police Department on your Comunidad del Valle. Welcome to the special show. It's no denying that there is a rift between the San Jose City Hall and the San Jose Police Department. So I wanted to bring both sides together to kind of talk about the issues at length, stay away from the 10 to 15-second sound bites, and hopefully discuss the issues in depth here. But one concern is I'm not sure when the last time was that both sides got together at a table like this without consultants, without anybody else, but both sides and shook hands and said, let's settle this. What's your estimation, Mayor?
Well, it depends on what you mean by both sides. Of course, the city manager is responsible for negotiations with the various unions, including the police union, over contract matters. And so those meetings continue on a regular basis because we have a contract coming up that needs to be negotiated. So those are ongoing, and you know, there are a lot of issues to talk about in contract negotiations.
But at some time, you would imagine that the mayor would say, listen, Deb, why don't you let me meet with them for a little bit. We're going to discuss the issues here and get to the nitty-gritty here.
Well, it's not the way it works in San Jose because our charter sets it up differently. Our charter gives a responsibility for bargaining to the city manager under the direction of the mayor and city council. So we set the policy direction. We give the manager orders, and she carries them out and through her negotiating team, which is usually led by Alex Gurza and people from that department. So there's not a role for the mayor to sit down with the president of the union and cut a deal. That's not the way it's supposed to work under our charter, and I try to follow the charter. Yeah. And we also want the staff working based on the direction of the entire council, not just the mayor.
I mean, maybe not cut a deal, but as we described, kind of get down to the nitty-gritty. Would you like to see that, maybe sit down with the mayor, the administration, and not the negotiating team, and say, okay, we're not going to negotiate a settlement here, but let's talk one-to-one about the issues?
Yeah, you know, we would welcome that. One of the things that we see is, as we talked, as the mayor indicates, we talk with the Alex Gurza, and that is done through the city manager's office that then gets transferred over to the mayor's office. And we all know when you tell one story one place, as it gets to somewhere else, it's always changed a little bit, and it may not be intentional. Sometimes going directly to the source, they're getting their direction from the mayor and the council. We obviously get our direction from our membership. By the time we get together, you never know how the message has been altered.
Let me do this if we can. I mean, we're far apart. Can we shake hands and start that way?
Sure, absolutely.
And say that, all right. I mean, I think that this is maybe where we can begin this dialogue. I mean, not that we're going to solve issues here on Comunidad del Valle, but we were running some video just a little while ago, and this is of the police academy that just got underway at the end of September. And here are, at last count, 45 young men and women who say they still want to wear the patch and the badge of the San Jose Police Department. What's that for you, Mayor? What's that like to know that there are still hundreds of people who are applying to be a San Jose police officer?
Well, it's reassuring to know that we have hundreds, if not thousands, of people who'd like to be a San Jose police officer. Not everybody's qualified. They're not all going to make it through, but it's good to know that there are a lot of people interested in coming in and filling, because we've got gaps. Our police department's too small. We're not yet at authorized strength. We need to get back to authorized strength, and then we need to increase the size of the department. But having new recruits is an important part of that. So it's good to have new recruits. We had a really good field, a good quality, and that's reassuring to know, but we also know it takes a long time to get a recruit out into the field where they're competent to do the work that they need to do.
I've heard from some rank and file, some officers who will tell some of these recruits, what are you doing? Don't get into this. This is not the environment you want to come into. Your take on that, and what's your advice to those recruits?
You know, that's not totally accurate. We believe this is a great job. I still believe in this city. It's a great city. What we're being real with them. We're saying you need to come in, you need to get the job, you need to get the training, and you need to see where it's at when you're at that position. We've got some of these recruits that we're asking the recruiters, well, do I have to sign a contract? How long do I have to stay? That's one of our concerns. When you lose someone who's came in and you've done all this training and they walk out the door, you've lost money. The other flip side of the problem is when people are leaving and they're experienced, there's no one to train the young guys. So they're going to have to evaluate that on their own, but we can tell you they're already asking questions. Before this academy started, I believe 6 people found places elsewhere and took those jobs instead of San Jose.
Real quickly, would you recommend a new recruit to join the San Jose Police Force?
If he had other options, no.
Wow, we'll get into that in our next segment. But if you'd like to find out more information about where we're coming from, here's a web address for the city's website for the mayor and also for the POA. Log on, and we'll talk more about this important topic when we continue. Stay with us. We're back here on Comunidad del Valle. Mayor, we heard Officer Votto in that last segment say that he would not recommend any new potential candidate to join the San Jose Police Force. What's your reaction?
Well, it's disappointing. I'm sorry that they don't recommend it. We have a great department. It's one of the best police departments in the country, and we very much need dedicated people who want to engage in public service to come to work for us. We have great officers working for us. We have some problems, there's no doubt about it, but it's still one of the best departments in the country. We're going to keep it that way. We'll work through the problems, and I think there is common ground between what the city council and the mayor see we need and what the POA sees we need. I think we all agree we need more officers, and we need to increase the size of the police force, but there are constraints on what we can do.
A lot of critics have said, I wish I was a San Jose police officer because I would be able to take home 90%, 80% of my salary. I mean, the retirement would be huge, cash in all my overtime and cash in my sick pay. That might have been the reality before, but it's not the reality now, and that's a reality that's scaring the current officers who are on the force.
Yes, and one of the big reasons that I say that if you had other options, you might want to look somewhere else is other cities have gotten together at the table and collaboratively attacked the pension issues and have worked out solutions. And I just don't see us being there. For a new officer coming into this department, he's going to get fantastic training. We are one of the best trained departments around. We really, truly are. But there's a lot of uncertainty. Morale is low. Their personal financial uncertainty with all the looming lawsuits and the pension reforms, in addition to just rising costs that are being burdened on the employees. They're not taking home what they used to are. We've had a lot of officers lose homes. We've given the 10% pay concessions. There's just so much unknown for that employee coming in. If he can go somewhere that can stabilize it a little bit, it might be a better position for him.
I've heard from other bargaining units in the last 10 years who say, boy, we always seem to be the ones giving. We always seem to be the ones giving. But police and fire, they always stick to their guns, and they're always accommodated when it comes to contract negotiations. Not that that's a fault of your own, but the other negotiating units on the table say, hey, let's make this let's give the same amount as a bargaining unit.
The POA has a long-standing reputation for coming to the table, being reasonable. We were the first to own up with the retiree medical and funding that system. We gave up the 10% as the other unions did, and it was an overwhelming majority of our members that did that. We recognize the financial issues the city are experiencing, and we want to help solve the problem. At the same time, you have to provide an environment that's going to make people want to stay and not feel like that you are continually just taken to the bank every time.
And that's not up to you entirely, but it kind of is up to you as a leader of the city. Your take on what Officer Votto just said.
Well, it was a tough thing for the officers to have to take a 10% pay cut. They didn't want to do it. We didn't want to make them do it, but the alternative was to lay off a whole bunch more officers. We would have to lay off another 150 officers if the POA and the membership hadn't stepped up to agree to take a 10% pay cut. But that hurt a lot of people, a lot of officers. But nevertheless, it was necessary to save the jobs of their coworkers. Paying more for pensions, that's obviously going to hurt as we begin to cover the unfunded liabilities. They'll make it difficult for the officers. So there's reasons the officers have to be unhappy, but these are all driven by skyrocketing retirement costs that we're trying to get control over so that we can have stability in our police force and the other departments.
Did you know that going in that there would be this kind of pushback and animosity, if you will, in introducing these reforms that you say the city desperately needs?
I didn't expect people to be happy about it. These are tough things to do. It's very difficult for unions to negotiate gives backs, and it's very difficult for individuals to give it back. And a 10% cut was a big hit. Everybody in the city took one, and it affected people differently on an individual basis. But in the aggregate, it was a hard thing to do, and I'm pleased that our officers and our firefighters and others stepped up and did agree to that by contract.
Is that comforting, or is that water under the bridge?
You know, it's kind of water under the bridge, honestly. It's not just the 10% pay cut. We've stepped up. We've been on the record for saying we need pension reform. Our officers know that as well. Our pension system is expensive, and it needs reforms. But we need to come to the table, and we need to talk about things that we can do legally. We've told the city for 2 years that the way they were going about it was illegal. And we've offered other reforms that could be saving them money tomorrow. The same pension system that the mayor and council and CalPERS, we've proposed that, and it's just not their way. They want their way, and that's kind of where we start to divide a little bit.
Okay, we'll let you respond in our next segment, Mayor. But again, a couple of websites for you, for the mayor's office and for the San Jose POA. We'll continue this important topic when we return. Stay with us. Your response, Mayor, to what Officer Votto said.
We spent hundreds of hours negotiating with our unions over the pension reforms that were necessary, including 20 sessions with the state mediator. We were not able to come to an agreement because we needed to solve the problem. And while proposals were made, they weren't sufficient to solve the problem. And the problem is that we can't provide services to our residents. We're facing service delivery insolvency and ultimately into bankruptcy if we didn't get control over this. So we were determined, and the voters agreed with us that we needed to take some pretty serious steps to solve the problem. We've done that. We're in the process of implementing it. There's a lot of uncertainty because of the litigation, but I'm certain that when we get through it, we'll be able to implement Measure B as it was approved by the voters.
And you've mentioned to me in the past that you consider yourself also part of the problem, because as a city council member, when the bargaining unit approached the city, you voted to authorize whatever increases in pay and benefits. You still hold to that?
I agree. There's plenty of blame to go around, and I have to share some of that blame because I've been on the city council and mayor now for 12 years nearly, and I voted for a lot of contracts that I wish I could do over because we increased the benefits, we increased the pay, and we can't afford it. We've gotten ourselves into a situation where the costs are going up so much that the city can't afford it and the employees can't afford it. The benefits are just too expensive, and that's what we have to change.
Is this irreparable, this relationship, or are we going to need a new administration to maybe make things better between the police officers and City Hall, or do you think there's still a shot here with the mayor?
I think there's a shot, but again, the mayor had a reform plan, and the reform plan started with the 10%, and we gave the 10%. It also had Measure B, the pension reform. The voters gave him the pension reform. The last part was increased revenues. One of the things that I would bring up is he had an opportunity to run forward with the tax initiative. That tax initiative could have brought in revenue to help us. If he would have simply advocated for that as much as he did for the pension reform, we might be seeing some more revenue that can help us with the public safety right now. Because the position that we're in with the pension reform hasn't even went into effect, more than likely may not if it does in the next 2-3 years. And we've got officers fleeing, and crime is exploding.
And that's part of the reason Chief Chris Moore told me that he was exiting the door was the fact that he felt the city did not back him up in this new proposed tax measure to help him keep the force that he says. He says he needs 1,250 officers. We're nowhere near that, and we're losing. There's about 100 who are getting their backgrounds checked right now because they want to leave the city. Do you think Chief Chris Moore, was a casualty of this war?
Well, I don't know precisely why the chief decided and when he decided. I think the chief, like every other officer that working for us, reaches a point in their career where they can make as much money by retiring as they can while they're working. Well, that's a pretty powerful reason to retire. So the chief does that analysis just like everybody else does, and I don't blame him. That's what I would be doing. There are many reasons why the chief decided it was time to move on. He's given those publicly. I know he's mentioned the failure of the council to go for the tax increase, but our fiscal reform plan calls for additional revenues after we've implemented the other savings. We haven't implemented that yet. We're still trying to implement Measure B, but it's being held up in litigation by the unions. But the main thing is, if you're going to put a tax measure on the ballot, you need to win. It was my assessment that it was not winnable in this election cycle for a lot of different reasons, which we went into in the public session.
It still remains the fact that San Jose, given, no matter what you say, remains one of the safest cities in the United States of America. That said, when there is a burglary in progress and there is a huge manhunt, that requires half of the police force to go find these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest problem we have is there's not enough police force left. We use the term one of the safest big cities, but you know, we're officers, we're on the street. When I am face to face with you, helping you with your crime problem or whatever you've called us there for, and calls are coming over, you know, and they'll say pending, you know, person calling for help. It's very difficult, and the reality is that we cannot service the people as they deserve right now, and without more officers, I don't know how to do it. And I understand that there's 100 officers in the wings, and what I would also say is we did an internal survey, and I don't mean we, the POA, I mean we, the police department. In that survey, it indicated that about half the department took it. Almost 50% said that, actually 68% said that they would leave the department by lateraling or retire in the next 3 years. And about half of the membership took it. The other part said that about 40% already had applications in. They just may not be in the background process. We could be on the verge of losing 300 officers. I don't know how we police the city of a million with 700.
Your reaction to that, Mayor?
I don't think the police department is big enough today, either on authorized strength or actual strength, and losing more officers is not a good thing. And so we have to take steps to do aggressive recruiting and hiring, which we're doing. And we need to increase the authorized strength. As we get savings from pension reform or other fiscal reforms, we can do that. But in the short run, there are things we need to do. We need more officers on the street. And the officers have stepped up. They're doing it with overtime, but we can't keep that up forever. We need to get more officers on the street. One of the things we could do is to civilianize some of the positions that the city auditors has identified, around 60 or so, that we could use civilians because it doesn't require a gun and a badge to do the job. One of those areas is backgrounding. We've had to pull officers off of the street to do backgrounds on these hundreds of officers, or potential officers, recruits, that want to come to work for us. We could do that with retired police officers, but we're being blocked by the police union, who are saying, on one hand, we don't have enough officers, on the other hand, there's a source of additional officers. So we have some problems in terms of arriving at solutions to the problems.
Lastly, for this segment, before we wrap it up, you received a ticket, a moving violation, if you will, and through the Freedom of Information Act, we found out that that you were not targeted, that nobody. It didn't seem from the text messages that were exchanged that you were being looked at and targeted. But just your reaction to everything, and I don't know if you feel that this was a part of the animosity that some of the police officers are feeling.
I don't know. I know that the officer that stopped me was completely professional, did his job the way I would want him to do his job for anybody else that got stopped. So that's the only interaction I had with anybody, and all the other stuff, other people are worried about that, not me.
All right. Well, we'll be back in our next segment, but we ask you to log on to these two websites and find out more about the issues. So stay tuned. We'll continue. Stay with us. We are back here on Comunidad del Valle with his very special guest, conversation between San Jose's Mayor Chuck Reed and the San Jose Police Officers Association. Is there anything that you'd like to get off your chest, Mayor? Again, not in soundbite form, but here we're having a conversation with the police union. Anything you want to get off your chest? Sure.
I just want everybody to know that I personally appreciate the work of our police officers. I know they work hard. They're called upon to risk themselves over and over again, and we have a great department with a lot of great people who have committed it. And I'm just really sorry that they've had to suffer, as other employees have suffered, by taking pay cuts and having to pay more for their pension benefits. But the alternative was far worse, and I'm sorry that they've taken it personally, but I understand that. My job has been to try to look out for the people of the city, and people have had to endure some hardships as a result of it.
How about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate the mayor appreciating us. We want more officers on the street. I know he just recently made the comment about us standing in the way to get a few more officers on the street by civilianizing the backgrounds and bringing back retirees. And I think it's interesting he brings that up because earlier we talked about the disconnect that's going between the city managers, the mayor, and the actual employee unions and OER. And this is a perfect example. The mayor's probably 3 weeks ago was on record with pension reform and talking about something known as double dipping. People retiring, making money, and then taking another job and making more money. And that was part of the reforms. And yet he sits here and proposes on the other side the exact same thing, bring back retirees to do the backgrounds, and at a cost of I think about $1 million for the city. We've proposed something different. We've got 40 to 50 officers who are on long-term disability. They've been injured, they've broken bones, they've had surgeries, they limp a little bit, but they're at home being paid. Bring them back, put them in backgrounds, let them do the job. They have a vested interest in the city. They care about the city, they care about the officers that work in the city, and they can do those backgrounds. And I'm not sure if the mayor even knows that we've proposed that.
Do you, Mayor, and what's your reaction to that proposal?
All I know is that we had a lawsuit filed to force us to go to arbitration over whether or not we had to talk to the union. We wanted to talk to the union, we wanted to negotiate, but they refused to meet and confer. So I don't know that there's been a proposal because there hasn't been any meeting and conferring. We're trying to get into meet and confer, but the police union has resisted that and have gone to court to seek a court order. In fact, there was probably a court order issued this morning saying that we have to go to arbitration to determine whether or not we can get a chance to meet and confer with them. So that's not very productive, and it certainly doesn't lead to negotiations.
But the idea itself of maybe bringing back those who are on disability, bring them back and work those desk jobs, is that doable?
I'm open to any idea that'll get more officers on the street, and if we can keep officers from having to come off the street to do backgrounding, we should look at that, whether it's retired police officers or disabled officers or whatever we can.
We talked about officers maybe not wanting to come to this city, although there's been about 800 who wanted to join the academy. But what about police chief? Who's going to want to come and lead you and your fellow officers?
That's a tough one. We've got a lot going on here in San Jose. We probably have morale lower than I've ever seen it in my 18 years. We've got so much uncertainty in the department. You're taking a ship that is not just losing the 3 to 5 year members. There's members of 15 years, 20 years. There's lieutenants, sergeants that are leaving. And as that upper echelon leaves, so does your experience. So coming in, you're going to have a very difficult battle on trying to get this thing steered straight.
That's a tough sell to bring in a qualified police chief to lead this major metropolis, Mayor. What's going to be your sales pitch?
It's always tough to find a new police chief. We went through that just a couple of years ago when we selected Chief Moore, who was an internal candidate. I think we'll have a strong pool of people around the country that are interested, senior police officials that would be interested in coming here because we have a great police department. Yes, we have our challenges. There are people who look for challenges and are willing to come in. We're working on that. We're working on the challenges, trying to solve the problems, and I think we'll find people that are willing to do that. I think we'll have internal candidates that are certainly very well qualified and could step up and do the job. We'll do a nationwide search, and whether it's inside from the department or outside of the department, it will remain to be seen.
All right, we have about a minute left. Any final thoughts before we make peace here and break bread?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and discuss it. It's nice to see it from the mayor's side, obviously, and I hope that we can find a way to get together, get back to the table, and come up with some real, solutions to the problems we have.
If you want to do it right here, we can negotiate. The cameras will be up, but we can do it right here. Mayor, any final thoughts?
Thanks for doing this. It's important for the community to understand the views of the police union and the views of the mayor and the city council, and this is a way to let people know.
All right, we thank you for sharing your part of your Sunday with us here on Comunidad de Valle. We want to thank El Observador newspaper for their continued partnership with this show. There are those websites for more information. We want to thank the mayor's office, San Jose Mayor Chuck Reed, for agreeing to be here and answer some kind of tough questions, and also to the San Jose Police Officers Association for doing the same. Officer Frank Votto representing very well. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Maybe we can shake hands and end it cordially that way. Thank you. All right, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And by all means, if you feel that this is needed again or not, we're always open.
Well, maybe if we had a table this size for the negotiations, instead of the
we'll change the setup.
really big table.